Gosh, where's my cursor?
That's
Wait a second. Oh, here it is. Okay, got it. Okay. And there's going to be something else that you do, right?
No, I think we got the spotlight, we got the recording, and it's 1:30, so you're good to go.
All right. So, hi, everybody, and welcome to session 3 of our 4 weeks together. Just a reminder, as Katie was saying a little while ago, next week we're using resistance bands instead of the free weights. So you really can't substitute a dumbbell for the exercises we're going to do with these bands. So they're pretty easy to find. And if you don't know how to find one, where to go, send me an email. I mean, even places like Five Below, I've seen them, Target, Dick's, you might be able to find them. And then at the end of class, when we do our stretches, we're using a strap that doesn't have elasticity. So you want to be stretching your muscles, not the strap that you're using. And anything really can work that you might have lying around the house. Last week I talked about, it could be the belt from a bathrobe. So it just needs to be long enough. Your leg will be up in the air. We'll be using it for a hamstring stretch while we're on our backs. So just you can have that visual. All right, let's go ahead and get started with our posture check. So just imagining somebody is looking at you, you're about to have your photograph taken and it's going to be hanging on somebody's wall in perpetuity. You want to look your best. So what do? You stand taller. And there's so much more than aesthetics about our posture, but sometimes it helps to even think about that, where we lift the chest and we bring our shoulders back, but we also bring them down. And there's a length through the spine that's so effective. When we stand taller, everything works better. And there are many reasons we want to stand taller, not only for our muscles, but also for our bones. As we hold on to that alignment, let's go right into those heel drops, bouncing down into our heels. You can use whatever amount of impact, however much oomph feels like the right amount for you. So I'm just coming up a little bit, bouncing down. It's a substitute for actual jumping, and I'm never going to tell everybody to go ahead and jump because everybody can't do that safely. This is a fabulous alternative. And I never count my heel drops during the day. I just do it a lot. I was doing it while I was waiting for the class to begin today. But if you really want to know the number, it's 70. So based on the research. So let's let that go. It may or may not have been 70. We can do our warm up now, where maybe we jog in place. Maybe we kind of move around the room a little bit. Maybe we stay in one place because that feels safer to you, and you can pump your legs up and down, shaking your arms around, still standing tall. The chest and the shoulders have a tendency to come kind of forward for the back to round, and then you're looking up with your head like that because you want to see where you're going. So we're just trying to kind of reposition our skeleton to be as vertical, and that's the key. Length and verticality is really what we want. So we'll leave our warm-up, holding on for balance now as needed. So it's up to you. You want to be safe. That's our number one priority. We'll do a couple of things for hip strengthening and particularly for balance. So one leg is going to come up in the air, and you're going to circle your lower leg 5 times one way, like you're circling a giant, like you're stirring, a giant pot. And I call this the stir the pot exercise. So the movement is coming from the hip joint. It looks like your knee is all rubbery. The knee is not a ball and socket joint. Your hip is. So from a side view with the other side, we're standing tall. The other leg comes up 5 times one way. And it's the way the hip is structured that allows us to do this kind of circular motion with our lower leg, but it's a rotational movement that's happening in your hip, which is deep in your groin. It's not here on the outside, it's deep in the groin. So now lower the leg down, go back to that first leg, holding on for balance as needed. This time with the knee straight and the leg a bit up off the floor. We're going to circle the whole leg 5 times one way. Basically the same thing that we just did, but a little bit of a variation of the movement. So 10 total, standing tall. And then that leg goes down. We do the same thing on the other side. The knee is straight. Make sure you're not just circling your ankle. It's the whole leg that's circling. And again, the circling is coming from that hip joint. And then we circle the other way. So it's interesting about the hip joint. If you ever have groin pain, chances are it's your hip that's the problem. If you have pain here on the outside of the hip area, it's probably a tendinitis or a bursitis. So that's not your hip, just to kind of clear something up that a lot of people have that misconception. So let's work now on the muscle in the back of the hip by doing our hip extension, where we bring one leg straight back and return. So these have a little bit of stretch in them, these pants. It looks like, and there's like a buckle kind of at the knee. It looks like my knee is a little bit bent, but it isn't. My knee is perfectly straight. As I go back, I'll just get my hands out of the way here, not leaning forward. So in other words, as the leg goes backward, you don't want to tip your body forward. And we're focusing on the work that we feel happening in this gluteal muscle that's called the gluteus maximus. This is one of our biggest muscles. It's a very important muscle. We need it to climb hills and stairs and get up out of a chair and do our squats and stand up tall. I mean, it is a very important muscle. And this is one of many ways that we strengthen it. So as usual, I have no idea how many times I've done this now. Sorry. I really rely on all of you to do the accurate counting. Let's switch to the other side. So straight back, and sometimes I just get my hands out of the way. You can put your hand, you can just hang them by the side. I just want to get them out of the way of the visual of what my leg is doing. And I've got my toes kind of pulled up just to keep my foot from dragging on the floor as I go backward. So, I can't point my toes because the floor is in the way. So it's just kind of a practical thing, what the foot is doing. And we do this very movement when it's toward the end of class, we're lying face down, we've got our forehead resting on the back of our hands, and we raise the leg up. So it's just another way to do the exact same thing we're doing now. Now we're adding that element of balance. When we're down on the floor, it's more work because you're lifting your heavy leg against gravity. So there's just more focus on even more strength there. All right, so let's now do a heel raise, where I'm going to say if you've got arthritis in your big toe, one or both, don't do this exercise. Instead, you could go back and do some heel drops. But for everybody else, we're going to come up on our toes and slowly go back down. So just a heel raise. And again, from a side view, I'm coming up and I'm going right back down. And the reason I'm adding this exercise today is because when our ankles are strong and flexible, we're much less likely to fall. So it's part of a fall prevention program, is having strong ankles. The other thing to be aware of when we do this is that the path of least resistance for the ankles is to go outward. And that's the way you would sprain your ankle. It would roll that way. Don't let your ankles roll out. Keep that ankle stable as you come up on all the toes. So sometimes what I do is I think about going toward my big toe, and that can help stabilize. The other thing is if you glue your ankles together and you come up and down, now your ankles can't roll out, but the balance becomes more challenged, so you might need to hold on. All right, let's step into a lunge position. Both heels are down. The front knee is facing directly forward. Be clear about that. The back knee is straight. We'll bring our arms out to the sides and simply circle our arms 10 times, backward only, like we're doing, well, it's not really the backstroke, but anyway, backward only, not because going forward is bad, it's just that going backward is better because now we're working those muscles in the upper back as opposed to the ones in the front of the chest. Let's reverse our leg position. Notice how far apart you can position your own legs. The farther apart, the more challenging. Arms are back out to the side, and again, backward only, shoulder circles, arm circles. You decide how big you want your circles to be. And if your shoulder is bothering you for some reason, you can keep your arms down by your side and circle. You could even do some shoulder rolls and keep the weight of the arms totally out of the picture. There's almost always a way that we can modify an exercise to suit your needs and make it work better for you. Squats are next. Wide leg position. As we squat down, we're pairing this with body mechanics so that you're picking something up off of the floor. You're setting yourself up for success by having that wide base of support. And as you squat, the hips go back behind you. Your back is not rounding. It's the glutes, your thighs front and back, your core, all of those places are working. And you could have your arms back behind you as you squat. That can really help nail down the proper form. And you can make it more challenging by having your arms way out in front of you, displacing the weight of your arms away from your center. So that could be a great way to do the body weight squat, as it's called. All right, so let's do our back bends, holding on to our low back with our hands for support. And 10 times, nice and easy. We have no agenda for how far we should be going. There is no should. Sense it in yourself. What feels like the right amount for you? So it really is different person to person. It's different from day to day within the same person. Gosh, sorry, that's my printer just printing. It's a very difficult printer. Sorry, I hit print like an hour ago. I should have turned it off. Anyway, it's done. So this direction of movement is called spinal extension. Perfectly safe to do. What we don't do is forward flexion, going the opposite way. We don't want to round our spine, but we can go that way because that takes the pressure off those vertebral bodies, off of the front of the spine, where compression fractures are more likely to happen. So let's go ahead and pick up our weights now, holding one in each hand. The next exercise is a little bit more challenging. So again, you could do it without the weight, but you could also, as is true for everything we do, to do less than 10 repetitions. So start with the elbows bent a little bit, and we're going to push one arm up in the opposite leg. All right, and we're going to do that 10 times. Arm and opposite leg. Keep those belly muscles pulled in. Shifting the weight from side to side. Working the core, working your back, working your arms, of course, your legs. Breathing. I really need to have a counter. So I'm going to do one more on each side. And I think that's probably pretty close to 10. And now let's stand in our way of challenging our balance with our feet close together. So this is called narrow base of support. And with one arm only, you're going to move the arm straight back for shoulder extension 10 times, standing as tall as you possibly can. Those abdominal muscles are pulled in. You're not turning your torso. So as the arm goes back, you're not moving the rest of your body. Only the arm is moving. Nice controlled return to the starting position. And then the other arm. So take that arm as far as it can go. Take it to the end of the possible range for you. The elbow is straight. Try to notice that as the arm goes farther and farther back, your shoulder blade there in your upper back is moving closer to the spine. So it's not just an arm, a shoulder exercise, it's also an upper back exercise. And we stand in this way to add that little bit of a modest balance challenge by standing with the feet close together. And so now let's challenge our balance a whole lot more by standing on one leg. And you could touch down on that other side. You could go back to narrow base of support as needed for you. But if possible, you're on one leg and now both arms are going straight back. So shoulder extension as we stand on one leg, making this a dynamic balance exercise, balancing as we do something. And you're breathing, noticing how those shoulder blades are coming closer and closer together. And when you've done 10, you're going to switch to the other side. So maybe I'll do this from a side view. So whenever we're moving one or more limbs kind of back behind us, there is that tendency to lean forward a bit, as whether it's the leg, as I said earlier, or now the arms, as the arms are moving, that we wouldn't want to be kind of leaning forward. So you want to make sure that you're doing what you think you're doing. And sometimes doing things in front of a mirror could be very helpful. Doing a squat in front of a mirror, and I'm just going to kind of go off on a tangent here. When we do our squat, you want to be able to see that your shins are vertical, that your back is straight, that your knees are not coming in front of the toes. And sometimes it takes looking at a full-length mirror from a side view to really kind of tell what's actually going on. Let's step into a lunge position again. Keep that front knee facing forward. The arms go overhead. And now we bend and straighten the elbows. We have done this in every single class. So about 50% or so of all of the exercises that we do, I call them our bedrock exercises or our foundational exercises, where I've kind of assigned particular importance to them. Not that I don't think they're all important. I never do anything where we're just kind of filling in time. There's a reason for every single thing that we include. But I really like this overhead work with the lunge position. So you'll see that repeated, consistently. Reverse your leg position. Once you're ready, the arms go back overhead 10 more times. And of course, if the arm overhead position is bothersome to your neck, to your shoulders, you wouldn't endure that ever, ever. What you would do instead is lower the arms down and go back to that shoulder extension movement with the arms down by your sides. And sometimes you do, some of the repetitions one way, and then you complete the set in some modified way because that's what you need to do at the moment. All right, we're going to do we're going to do something that we haven't done. Actually, I haven't done it in any of my classes for a while, and that's called a weighted squat. So if squats are hard for you, I would say don't do this with the addition of the dumbbells. But if you're game, you're going to put these dumbbells right on your shoulders. I'm going to come a little closer. So I've got the dumbbells right on my shoulders. I'm holding the end with my hand because, of course, we don't want it to fall. And we're going to do 10 squats. And now we're that much heavier. So it's the same squat exercise that we did without the weight. You might find that you don't get down as low to the ground. You'll have to see. And as I said a little while ago, maybe you do, 5 or so with the weights, and then you leave the weights on the floor and say, okay, I'm going to finish this set without this additional weight. Or you could even just be standing there and saying, I'm done. I'm going to wait for us to move on to the next thing. And if that's what you need to do, that's exactly what I want you to do. So 10 of these. And then we take these weights carefully off our shoulders, and we'll do that bent over row, as it's called. So I'm going to come closer in a moment, but let me start far back like this. We go into the beginning of a squat. So just that little bit, bend the elbows. And now this is a bent over row. However, let me come closer. So, because you don't need to see my head, what we're going to do is one arm all by itself 5 times. And our backs are really working like crazy to keep us in this position. And then 5 on the other side. Breathing, those abdominal muscles pulled in. And then 10, and I'll back up again, both arms going together. So 10 times. You're breathing. It's the straightening of the elbow that works the back of the upper arm. Our thighs, our core muscles are working, but it really is also such a great back exercise because of the fact that we're staying in this sustained position against the weights that we have in our hands for this period of time. 10 times. And then we'll step up out of that, and let's do a simpler wide leg position with a little bit of a squat, like we're sitting, a different kind of squat, really, like we're sitting on a high stool. And we'll just do 10 bicep curls, bending and straightening the elbows, keeping those abdominal muscles pulled in the whole time. Breathing, that controlled lower to the starting position so you're not letting the weights just fall back quickly. It's all very intentional. Paying attention to all the areas that you're working, what's going on. And after 10, we're going to leave one of the weights on the floor. Let's hold on to the single weight on each end. Bring our arms overhead and bend just a little bit from one side to the other think I'm gonna come down on my knees. I might have done that last time, I can't remember, but so that you can see, really see what I'm doing. And I'm reaching up and over. I'm thinking about lengthening along my spine 5 times each way, working those muscles along the side of the waist, those core muscles that live there on those outer portions of the torso. Now, before we get down on the floor, I want to show you something. So just a little point about our squats. I almost forgot. So this is important. Notice when you sit down, now what does that look like? It's a squat, right? Hips go back behind me, knees are not coming in front of the toes. I'm pushing down with my legs and my core, my glutes to come back up. So the idea of using a chair every time you get up, try to do it without your hands. Now, if you have to use your hands, you use your hands, but over time, try to use them less and try to see, can I get up without my hands? Don't let your knees go in toward the middle. Keep those knees facing straight ahead. That's coming from hip strength. And that is such a great way to work an exercise into everyday activities. I mean, think about how many times we get up and down out of a chair. All right, let me get this out of the way, and then we are going to get down on the floor. I mean, there's an exercise we often do in physical therapy, chair stands, where the exercise is just to get up and down off of the floor. I'm sorry, off of a chair, maybe however many times in a row, just for the purpose of strengthening. And not to talk about any kind of gloomy topic, but it's important to know that one of the main reasons that people get admitted to assisted living facilities, aside from cognitive problems, dementia, Alzheimer's, and so on, one of the main reasons is the inability to get out of a chair unassisted. And so, of course, we want to stay in our homes as long as is humanly possible. And so it really behooves us to work on these things that, we can't take for granted anymore. You can't take for granted that, you're going to be able to do the things you can do today in 5 years if you don't keep working on it. And I give myself the exact same pep talk. So, all right, let's go ahead. We're on our backs and we stretch our legs out. And we're noticing our contact with the floor. Just give ourselves a moment or two to settle. Sometimes it's helpful to take your own hands and reposition your head, kind of giving that little bit of a lengthening to the back of the neck. And then when you lower your head back down, it's in a more ideal position. Let's begin our posture sequence now, where we press the back of the head directly down into the floor, holding it like so for about a count of 3, letting it go, and doing it again. Straight down, breathing, feeling the work there in the back of the neck, not in your face, not in your jaw, very specifically targeted here to neck strengthening of the back of the neck, isometric neck strengthening. And then we leave that and we move on to pressing the shoulders down toward the floor as those shoulder blades come toward each other. And you hold that for 3 counts. Slowly letting it go and doing it again. 3 repetitions. Breathing. The neck is no longer participating. You're just so hyper aware of what's happening in yourself. And then thirdly, we move on to tightening up the buttock muscles. And as you tighten these muscles, they go from being mushy to being firmer. So it kind of pushes you up off of the floor. And then you slowly melt right back down to the floor and repeat. Tightening as much as you can, feeling, we talked about these are some of our biggest muscles, so you want to match that potential with the effort that you're using. You know, you don't need to be cautious here like you might have been with your neck. And after 3 times, we move on lastly to the knee press, the back of the knee, pressing down toward the floor as the toes point up toward the ceiling. And then we release that after a few seconds and doing it again. The backs of your knees may or may not actually touch the floor. It doesn't matter. It's the direction of movement that we're always interested in. And you might find that one knee does one thing, the other one does something else. You know, don't get sidetracked with how far you can go. Notice the quality of the movement and exactly what's happening as you do it. Deep breath when you're done. And we'll do our pelvic floor strengthening exercise, our Kegels, where we pull up and in those deep muscles that support the bladder in women and men. So it's as if we're trying to hold back the urge to urinate. Those are the muscles that you're working here, and we're doing it 10 times. Nobody should be able to look at you and see any external movement. Their buttocks aren't tightening, for example. This is just deep within. And, you know, anybody can have trouble with their pelvic floor, with weakening that can happen. It's not just women who have had children. It's men have pelvic floor dysfunction. It's, you know, people who've never had children, people who are overweight, who are skinny. There's not one type of person. So even though you see kind of some, you know, a woman who's had many, many children might have more of an issue here, but it's a myth to think that that is the only type of person who deals with this problem. And then we're going to bend our knees. All right. Now, we always do the toe dips next. What we're going to do today to kind of drive home the way we want to be engaging these deep core muscles is 5 times only with your knees bent and without tilting your pelvis at all. Have your hands here on your lower belly. Take a deep breath. And then as you exhale, imagine you're blowing out 100 birthday candles. May it be so one day for all of us. And then we take a deep breath again. And you blow out. And as you're blowing out, you're drawing your navel toward your spine, but you're not flattening your low back. You're not moving at all. And you repeat this now 5 times total. And what we're doing here is we're engaging some of the deepest core muscles that you can access without any movement whatsoever. So many people feel, and this is actually the way we used to teach it in PT, that we would say flatten your low back into the floor or imprint your low back into the floor before you do the next core exercise. We know now that that's not correct. they're strengthened curves. We want that natural curve to be maintained as we do these various exercises. I mean, think of a stone bridge and the curve of the bridge. So working on that and using that same idea now, you're pulling in those muscles, and we're going to bring up one leg and then the other into that 90-90 position, and we lower one foot after the other in the direction of the floor. We call these toe dips. This is what this exercise is called, as if we are dipping our toes in an imaginary pool of water. But you don't have to get your toes that close. You don't have to lower that far. And if you're getting toe cramps, do a heel dip. Keep that foot flexed and dip your heel down. You can do a little mini move to make it easier. You could go a lot farther to make it harder. You are in the driver's seat, and you just have to really kind of be attuned with yourself to know when you need to kind of back off a little bit and when you need to push ahead, like that Kenny Rogers song. You got to know when to fold them and hold them, and all that song that he sang. Okay, the feet are back down. The heels are pulled as close to your hips as you possibly can. That's going to help with cramping. And we're going to do a bridge in a moment. So if you have something behind your head, you always want to remove it to do the bridge exercise. And what a bridge is we lift our hips up. It's like I'm showing right now. So there's some amount of space under the pelvis. Stay like that as you bring your arms overhead and back down 10 times. So a sustained bridge with this arm overhead position. Try to keep your knees from being shaky, from kind of wobbling in and out. Don't let the pelvis lower as the arms go overhead. Notice all the different places that are working. Breathing. And when you've done 10, you lower your arms down. We lower our hips down. And let's go ahead and grab hold of our weights. Now our dumbbells. So you could have your knees bent or straight. It's up to you. We're only going to do 2 exercises in this position, and it's the 2 that we always do. So these 2 of our bedrock exercises. Arms are straight up toward the ceiling, palms facing each other, elbows are straight, and we bend and straighten the elbows. Triceps extension. Belly muscles pulled in. We always want to engage those belly muscles, those core muscles, whenever we have weights in our hands. It's good form. It's protective of your back. And we want it to be like a conditioning response where you don't even have to think about it anymore. Like Pavlov's dog, the bell rang and he started salivating because he was conditioned to think he was about to get a treat. So we want it to be like that. Groceries coming out of the car, you pull in those belly muscles. Bring the arms back up toward the ceiling. And now you decide with one or both weights. So you could leave one on the floor. The elbows are straight, and we lower the arms toward the floor over our head and back to vertical. Keep those belly muscles pulled in. Don't let your low back pull away from the floor as your arms go farther and farther overhead. We want to keep that neutral spine position. Keep the elbows straight. Don't hold your breath. Just always remember that the farther you go into that range of motion, the more work you have to do to get back. And so you never want to feel like you're straining. You always want to feel like you're working, but that's a big difference between feeling a strain and feeling like you're overdoing it and feeling like you're just working and getting stronger. And it's just really a matter of just really staying tuned in with yourself. So we're finished with the weights for today. You can go ahead and leave them off to the side. Let's do our second round of the toe dips. So remember, we pull in those muscles first. We're keeping that neutral spine position as we bring one leg and then the other up in the air, and we lower one foot after the other in the direction of the floor. Some people find it helpful to have their hands under the under the buttock area. You never want this to bother your low back. You don't want it to bother anything. I mean, I went through this period with a hip issue, and every time I did this, my hip would click. It was like click, 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 and you don't want clicking. You want to see, can I make that go away? And I was able to make it go away by doing it without the weights, but it could also be by going through a smaller range, for example. You just have to, experiment sometime with those things. All right, so the feet are back down on the floor, and we're going to turn to lie on one side, hips and knees bent. And we'll do an exercise called the fire hydrant exercise, where the top knee that's bent at the hip and the knee, belly muscles pulled in, you're going to raise that whole leg up and down. The knee doesn't come up first, the foot doesn't come up first, the whole shebang is coming up as one piece. The pelvis does not roll back. Generally, this exercise is taught with someone on their hands and knees, and then the leg is brought out to the side. So that kind of makes that clearer image of why it's called a fire hydrant exercise. But this is, to me, a preferred position because we can really concentrate on what that leg is doing and not substitute other things. And then we straighten out the top leg. The bottom leg could be bent or straight. I'm going to straighten mine out as I always do for my own reasons, and we'll raise that top leg up and down. The knee is straight. The foot and the knee stay facing forward. There's a limit, an anatomical limit to how high your leg is able to go. It's about 45 degrees of motion here. And again, we're not going to come around and measure, but if you find your leg is way up in the air, chances are you've turned your foot up, and now you can bring your leg up like I'm showing, and then you're using your psoas muscle in the front. We're trying to use one of these outer gluteal muscles as we do this. So the positioning is really key. Let's turn to lie on the other side. And hips and knees bend to start. Your pelvis is straight up and down. And that top leg now, 10 reps. So a very common question I get is, how much weight should I use? How do I know it's time to progress myself? That's one of the questions I answer in my frequently asked questions page on my website. So I would actually suggest to you that you check out my website, because you might, in that page in particular, because you might have a question about one of the frequently asked questions. It might, in other words, trigger a question that you didn't even know that you had, and then we can talk about it next week. All right, now the top leg straightens out, and we do our side leg raise. This is called hip abduction. This is such an important exercise. Again, it's one of our keepers. It's one of the exercises we do every single time. Keeping this outer hip muscle strong is not only critical for your hip, but for the function of your knee and your low back. They did a really interesting study looking at people with chronic low back pain and found that this gluteus medius was weak in many, many people. So chicken and egg issue, I mean, who knows, but it was interesting to see that correlation. So let's go ahead and turn to lie face down, coming around the bend here. We're resting our forehead on the back of our hands and just settle for a moment. Now, keeping your pelvis down, you begin to raise one leg from the hip. The knee is straight. Breathing, feeling that most of the work here is being done by that buttock muscle, not your low back. So this should never be bothersome to your low back. You could try a couple of things, such as tightening up that buttock muscle first, only on the side you're lifting, and then lift the leg. I'm going to switch to the other side now. So that's one thing you could try. Make sure you're not lifting the leg too high, because then you're twisting your back, but also putting some kind of cushion under the hips and the low belly area can make a big difference for a lot of people. I mean, it can be very surprising how much that can help in someone where no matter what they do, this really seems to bug their low back. And then you put a pillow there and it goes away. So, before you decide that an exercise is not the right one for you, we always should check to make sure that certain kinds of modifications don't solve the problem. Hands are by the shoulders, and we do our press up next, where we're bringing our upper body away from the floor. You could also be on your forearms if that's better for you. Have your hands farther away from your shoulders if that's better. And just like when we were standing and doing our back bend, which is basically the same thing we're doing now, and I said we have no agenda for how far you go, it's the same thing in this position. So the aim is not to straighten your elbows. The aim is just to get your spine moving in this direction called extension, which is not only a safe thing to do, but it's an important motion of the spine that we want to preserve. All right, hands resting on the back of the head again, your forehead resting on the back of your hands, and bring your legs really far apart. Widen that leg position. Bend your knees. Bring your heels together with the toes sticking out, kind of like frog legs. And now 10 times, you're just going to squeeze one heel into the other and release. Press and release. Don't press so hard that your hips pop up away from the floor, but just feel where you can tell the muscles are that you're working. So hip, kind of deep in the buttock area. We can get some of the smaller muscles targeted as we do this weird kind of exercise. It's another isometric. 10 times. Make sure you're breathing. And then we lower the legs down, reposition them so that you're comfortable. Bring the arms out to the sides, palms down at shoulder level, and we raise only our arms straight up, lower back down, counting to 10. It's one after the other. We're not holding the arms up there. We're just going up and down. And we're taking the arms as far as we can to work those back muscles, particularly the ones that are between the shoulder blades. Okay, now we're going to come up on our hands and knees. If you can't be on your hands and knees, you're not going to do it. You're going to follow the instructions, though, the exact same instructions that we're about to do. So hands and knees. So your knees are under your hips. Your hands are under your shoulders. This is called the pregnant cat exercise. So without moving your back, you're going to let your belly hang down, like really just let it go. This is not that cat-cow exercise. There's no movement of your back. So you let everything go. But now you pull your navel up toward your spine. And then you let everything go again. And then you pull everything up really tight. And the key, we're doing this 5 times. The key is to do it without any movement of the spine. So the belly hangs down, and then you're really drawing your navel towards your spine. This is very similar to what we were doing on our back, where we were doing it with those deep breaths. And now we're just really feeling our ability to control those muscles. So after 5 times, you're going to lie back down. And we've got 2 more exercises to do, where first we bring our arms down by our sides, palms facing up. We anchor the pelvis down into the floor first and lift our upper half 10 times. So the arms come up too. Your head is not lifting any higher than the chest is able to lift. You're breathing. Having that cushion under the hips could be also helpful with this exercise, which is really forcing us to do a lot of work in our backs. And then we take a deep breath. And plank is last. So some of our hardest exercises come toward the end of the class. And so, as I said before, pretty sure I said this in the other 2 classes, the modified position is knees and forearms, like I'm showing right now. But if you can be on your toes and forearms, we're going to push up into plank. I'm going to count to 45, mostly in my head. And you're just going to see how long you were able to hold it. Just make sure you're breathing. All right, here we go. Push up into plank. That's 10. And 20. 30. 40. 45. Lower down. Say hooray for me. Really, I do that every time. I tell myself, good for you. You know, it's so easy for us to have that negative self-talk, and we just need to praise ourselves more often for a job well done. Let's go ahead and bend one knee and reach back for our foot or our ankle or wherever you can grab hold, feeling that stretch in the front of your thigh. Taking some deep breaths, keeping the pelvis down. And let's let it go and switch sides. And if you can't reach anywhere, then you could just do some slow knee bends, you know, where you're just keeping the thigh down, but you're just bending and straightening your knee in this position. That would be a good substitute. Deep breath. And let's let it go. And we'll turn to lie on our backs. And I'm going to take my weight off here. And we stretch our legs out. And we bring our arms overhead for that wonderful full body stretch from our hands to our feet. Let's bend our elbows, hold on to the opposite elbow or forearm, keeping the arms overhead. And we bring our upper body over to one side, just bending sideways from the waist. And as an option, you might find that you could bring your legs over a little bit as well, but don't do that if it feels like it's too much. We take a couple of deep breaths in this position. And then back to center we go. Upper body goes the other way. And we decide whether or not including the legs makes it enhance the feeling of this stretch along the side of the whole body. And we're breathing. Come back to center. And let's bring one knee toward the chest so we can hold on to our thigh behind our knee. We'll flex our foot, straighten out the knee for a hamstring stretch, and then we'll circle the ankle. So when we do this next week, we'll have our strap around the foot and we'll be holding the strap on the other, on the other ends. And it'll be a much more passive kind of stretch. This is called an active hamstring stretch. And you could omit the ankle circling if that feels like it's a distraction to you, because we really want it to be the back of the thigh that we're targeting. Let's switch sides, same thing. Once you have your knee as straight as you're able to get it, you add in those circles of the ankles as an option. It's a nice way to strengthen the ankle. We talked about those heel raises earlier when we were standing and how important the ankle is to our balance. So ankle circles are just a very easy way to work on that. You could do it while you're sitting in a chair or really any position where you're reclined somehow. So now, for the sake of clarity, and I usually don't tell you which side to do first, you're going to take your right hand and reach across to your left thigh. So I'm not under my knee, below my knee, I'm above my knee. And just a little bit, we're pulling the leg across the body. I'm not trying to bring my knee all the way to the floor. That's too much spinal twisting. I'm really just addressing the outer hip and thigh area. Deep breath. And then bring this leg back to the middle. Let's do this the other side now. So left hand on the right thigh above the knee. And we just pull across. I mean, this is as far as I can go because it's really pulling in this outer hip area. And it feels like a decent stretch to me. So and that's all that matters. It's what it feels like to you. You are the center of the universe in Strongbones land. Deep breath. Let's bring it back to the middle. Bend the knees. Have your ankles close together in the center. Lower your knees to opposite sides. Bring the arms out to the sides at shoulder level, palms up. And now we just get to do nothing, getting out of the way, literally just doing no work, being very aware of the absence of work as we stay in this position for another breath or two. Let's bring our knees up to the center, slide our legs down, arms go overhead one last time for that full body stretch. And lower your arms down. And we'll stay here just for another few seconds. Our gratitude moments where we give ourselves that opportunity to contemplate gratitude. Slowly bend your knees. Slowly roll to one side. Come up to sitting. Take a moment or two before coming up to standing. So just always making sure you're not lightheaded at all. So thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm looking forward to next week and particularly to addressing your questions or comments. So I'll see you then. Thanks.